Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Dr. Lance Thompson, GlobalMindED's board chair, and I'm pleased to introduce this month's STEM equity event, No More Gates or Gatekeepers. STEM is for everyone. Thank you for joining us today. If you are unfamiliar with our work, GlobalMindED creates a capable, diverse talent pipeline by getting more women, first-gen college, and poverty-affected students into the education, economic, mobility, and leadership pipeline by connecting them to role models, mentors, internships, and jobs. We do this through monthly equity events like today's event, through our daily newsletter that features stories of heroes who have beaten the odds, and through college programs at HBCUs, HSIs, and tribal colleges. You can find out more on our website at www.globalminded.org. On November 4th, we will hold our first satellite event at Georgia Tech with GlobalMindED higher education, STEM, and business leaders. And we're going to bring that flyer event up on the screen, which you can see now, which gives you a little bit of information. If you can't come in person, we are fortunate enough to have WABE, the PBS affiliate in Atlanta, live stream the event anywhere in the country. You can register for this event on our website. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our panel leader, Dr. Susan Swayze. Dr. Swayze is a DE&I strategist and expert researcher who created Diversity Think Tank to help organizations identify transformative solutions and accomplish audacious goals. She is a highly sought after speaker on topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, with special emphasis on holding conversations about bias, race, and gender pay equality. She has inspired audiences in Africa, Brazil, Canada, and across the United States. An accomplished scholar, Dr. Swayze has authored 3 books and more than 50 scholarly works. Her favorite quote, "Don't try to predict the future, intentionally shape it." With that said, I'm going to turn the panel over to Dr. Swayze.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and I'm so happy that we are all here today tackling this important topic that will not take care of itself. So I'm happy we have a boots on the ground panel, and I want to quickly introduce each of you. We have Dr. Rochelle Eddy, Vice President of Instruction and Accreditation at Tennessee College of Applied Technology, Murfreesboro. Am I saying that right? Murfreesboro. Dr. Eddy serves as VP of Instruction and Accreditation in the Tennessee Board of Regents System, providing leadership and training for faculty and student services. Formerly the VP of Community and Economic Development for the Nashville and Middle Tennessee YMCA, Dr. Eddy has developed strategies for reducing barriers and increasing adult student attainment of post-secondary certificates and degrees. In addition, she has volunteered for Big Brothers Big Sisters and Junior Achievement, among other organizations. We also have Jackie Smalls, Vice President of Social Impact Coalitions for Discovery Education. As VP of Social Impact Coalitions, Jackie is responsible for strategic growth and impact of partnerships on critical issues in K-12 education. This includes the STEM Careers Coalition, the first of its kind national STEM initiative powered by corporate and nonprofit leaders and anchored in schools by Discovery Education, as well as the Social Emotional Learning Coalition, a network of partners committed to bringing critical, culturally relevant, social, emotional learning resources into core instruction to support educators and students nationwide. That is quite a portfolio, I must say myself. That is a lot for one job, one umbrella organization. We also have Zion McNeely. Zion is a 2022 graduate of Potomac High School, where he played baseball. Zion is also a graduate of the Future Kings program, where he focused on custom engineering. And as part of his Future Kings experience, Zion earned a certification to fly unmanned aircraft while still in high school. Currently, Zion is a college freshman at Norfolk State University and is majoring in electrical engineering. I can't wait to witness what Zion does next. Lastly, we have Dr. Eric King, who's the founder of Future Kings. With 35 years of experience in computer technology and small business management, Dr. King works diligently to help youth from underserved communities start and successfully operate their own STEM-based businesses and to head off into STEM college majors and careers. Eric has developed an organization for boys grades 6 to 12 that uses K-12 active learning strategies and authentic education to engage students in STEM topics while helping them understand that college attendance and business ownership are attainable objectives. Eric's goal is to create a pipeline of talented youth from underserved communities and lead them into STEM-based careers. And Zion is a graduate of his program. To full disclosure, Dr. King and I have worked together on prior projects, and the Future Kings actually has a kernel of his dissertation research in it. From that seed, this whole entire program grew. So I have this huge pleasure to be part of this exciting panel. And I wanted to open up the panel with a question. The title of the panel is No More Gates or Gatekeepers. Can each of us just give a brief comment on what that phrase means to you? No more gates or gatekeepers? Sunday dinner.
I feel like I was going to say, I feel like I should go first. I'm the only non-STEM person on here, and I just couldn't wait to disclose that. So I'm more relaxed now that everyone knows. But coming from a technical education and non-traditional background, for me, what it means is not holding STEM and STEM careers in an ivory tower, but realizing that even at the technical level, you know, when we're talking about career and technical education in high school, that all of that qualifies as being STEM, and sometimes it's just the beginning of someone's long career path. So.
And I hear it as a goal statement, that our objective is to get to the point where there are no more gatekeepers, and also as a recognition of the fact that there are gatekeepers now, but that that our goal is to eliminate all of them.
I agree on that statement. I believe that once we do remove all those people who gatekeep and those who try to put gates up, that's when we really will see, I guess, the best of people, I'd say, or when people really will want to go into STEM. A lot of people would like I know would like to go into STEM, but they don't think that they'd be good at it, even though I know they would. I convinced them. So once we remove those gates, I think we'll see a lot more people enter in to a STEM field.
And I agree with everyone on this esteemed panel, what they have said. I would just add that I think it's putting a spotlight on what currently exists. And hopefully this conversation will be just, you know, highlighted a little bit more in terms of the gatekeepers and the gates that have held those back that we know should be in STEM or are in STEM, but we just don't see them as well. So that's how I see it.
There's a quote that I cannot find the original owner of. If anyone knows out there in the world, please put it in the chat. The quote is, "Talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not." I don't know who said that first, but that quote always rings true to me. So why do you think there's a continued lack of diversity in the STEM fields?
Well,
and technology, Michelle, just so you know, technology is STEM, so you are STEM.
I think that your first statement was indicative of why there's a lack of diversity. There are gatekeepers, and part of the role, I think, of the gatekeepers to keep people out and be selective on who comes in. So the fact that there are so many gatekeepers, whether it be individuals or processes that have to be managed, or academic skills that have to be managed, they all combine to limit the number of people that can come in. Something else that we recognize in Future Kings is that so many times coming into STEM fields, the elite students are targeted, and the regular students who are not so elite are overlooked. And then the third thing we see is that it is easy for some of the students who are not in STEM right now to find something else to do. So I think all those things kind of combine to limit the lack of diversity in STEM fields.
On top of that, I think it's also intimidation. Some people look at STEM, they see what you could do and what you have to do to get there. They take a look at the path. Like even for electrical engineering, I have to take calculus. I see math that I didn't even know existed, and it can't get it. And I know it looks intimidating. And I know that once I do finally start it, it may not be as bad as I initially thought it was. But that is a thing that gets some kids. They look at the curriculum that it takes to get that undergrad degree to get an undergrad or a degree in engineering or any sort of STEM field, and they back off a little bit because they think that's a little hard. That looks complicated. That looks hard. That looks that's going to take a lot of time out of my day. So that's another thing that also that makes why people don't want to go into a STEM field.
And I could add my 2 cents, and even though I'm the introducer here, but I always chime in when I can. But I agree with the points that were made earlier, and I would even just elaborate on that. That I think historically, we weren't given the path or encouraged to go into the path of math, science, and engineering. So these were fields that we weren't participating in. And those who participating in this field, they went on and they became these leaders and managers and executives of these technology companies. And as you just said, they became the gatekeepers, and they decide who comes in and out. And usually it's people they're comfortable with, people that look like them, people who've come through the same traditional path that they've come through. So they kind of have this self-selection that has been exclusive as opposed to inclusive. And then I think, to Zion's point, we're all human, and human nature says, I'm going to invest in things that I think I'm going to get a return on. So if I'm going through a program that's very challenging and takes a lot of effort and commitment, but I don't see people in those fields who look like me, and I'm going to get a return and I'm going to benefit from that investment, then is that really where I want to spend my time? So I might be intentionally or unintentionally influenced to go and do something else because those fields don't seem to offer opportunities for me, even if I've made that large investment.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, if you look around at leadership, you don't see diversity. Right. So if there's no thought in diversity, then it's not going to be intentional to build that diversity that we're all talking about today. I would also say from an educational standpoint, I think students are tracked. They're tracked and they're, attended to say, you go this pathway, you should take this course versus not taking this course. It might be too hard for you. So in preparation to go into the STEM field, it's challenging and it's hard because you haven't taken the classes that could well prepare you for that pathway to STEM. And lastly, I would say when you actually get there, if we talk about actually, if you've made it through that pathway and you're there, you look to your left, you look to the right, you don't see yourself. So I hear more and more from a young lady, a professor came up to her and said, "Are you in the right class?" Because she was the only student of color and a young woman in a computer science class. So that tells you, the expectation of who should be in the room. And then are you encouraged to stay in the room and are you supported? And that doesn't mean, shrinking away from who you are. That's what we call inclusion. That's true inclusion where you're embraced for who you are. And I think that has a lot to do with it as well.
Michelle, did you want to speak to this from your institutional perspective?
Well, I'm going to jump in again, so as I mentioned previously, I do work primarily with adult non-traditional students, but I haven't always. And so when I think about equity and when we talk about diversity, I can't really just look at it from a gender perspective or culture perspective because, you can look at someone on paper and they seem to be just like the last 5 people you met with the same profile. But the reality is we don't know what's going on in the home. We don't know in terms of gatekeeping, as you said, in the institutions. Some of our gatekeepers, I believe, are unintentional. I believe that sometimes, and I'm thinking of a particular counselor, sometimes we think we're doing students a favor by moderating their expectations of themselves. And that is one form of gatekeeping. So I just think we have there's a lot of work to do. I'll say that.
Eric, did you want to discuss your boots on the ground solution?
Well, yeah, the Future Kings program is a multi-year, multi-level program. And the STEM fields that we're teaching are cybersecurity, computer game design, biomedical sciences, and drone engineering. And we're teaching college level material to students who are in secondary school in all those 4 areas. All of them have a significant math background or reading background, and that would usually be the type of gatekeeper requirement that would keep people out. Our solution to it is a process that we call dessert first. And so when they first come into our program, we're not giving them all of the most challenging academic topics. We're giving them lots of hands-on, fun things to do that represent what they're going to be doing when they get into that career. And as they move up the ladder from level 1 to level 2 to level 7, there's more and more math that is introduced, more and more of the reading is introduced, so that by the time they get to the end of our program, they have been introduced to the math, but they have also been introduced to the fun stuff associated with being an engineer, you know, be able to make stuff, or the fun stuff that's involved with being a microbiologist. And they understand now that those other core academics are an important part, but they were motivated to overcome those challenging studies because they had experienced so much of the great parts of being an engineer or a microbiologist or a game designer or an engineer.
Great, thank you. When you hear the words put together, STEM and equity, what does that mean to you? Because in the world of diversity, equity, inclusion, typically equity gets the least amount of attention, right? There's a lot of focus on the diversity, then there's some focus, but less on inclusion. And then equity tends to be the one that gets the least amount of attention. So when we talk about STEM equity, what would that look like if we actually had STEM equity?
I'll jump in on this one. I'll go back to, K-12 education. If we looked at systems across the United States, we won't even talk about international, but if we look at just across the United States, if we saw equity, then all students would have access to all programmings. They would have access to the best. They would have access to the things that prepare you for a STEM career. And in some zip codes, depending on your zip code, will depend on what access you have to those programs. And so that to me speaks to equity in terms of access to what will prepare you. And also just the knowledge of what you need in order to succeed. I just by happenstance, and that's what I say, until I got into college, many, many years ago at South Carolina State, that was the first time I had a Black science teacher. She was a woman and said to me, took an interest and said, you know what, you're really engaged in these topics. What are you thinking about? What careers are you thinking about? And it changed my life. And so I would say not even having the knowledge, the equity of knowledge of what is possible is not there all the time. And you don't always see it. And if you can't see it, we know that famous quote, if you can't see it, then how are you going to be it? Or how do you even dream that it's even possible? And so to me, we have a long way to go in terms of equity as it relates to even just preparing students for a STEM field career.
I just jump off of Jackie's comments. I think that was excellent. And I agree with that. And I think, having all of the resources, knowledge, the attention that it takes to be successful in STEM fields, and then having the access and having the support systems and the encouragement, to me, that's your equity. All these things that another community would have access to and be aware of to be successful in the STEM field, that those same things are available across all different demographics of society, including in the Black community. So not asking for anything more or less, or we just need more than having only 2/3 or 1/3 of what other people have access to make themselves successful?
And continuing to build on that, one of the things that we do, building on Jackie's point, is visualization, meaning that in our meetings, we will have successful Black men, since our group is primarily centered around Black males and Latino males, that we bring in successful males who start out in the same socioeconomic conditions that our students did. Mostly they were from economically challenged households, but through good decisions and hard work, they've risen to the top of government or to industry or whatever their chosen field is. And when they come in and speak to our students, then those students get to see that it's possible. And they get to see someone who looks like them, who has really achieved. As an example, we had the Army Surgeon General come in and speak to our guys. That was the eye-opener for many of them. We've had senior executives from all types of government agencies. We had a speaker who came in who was the director of pre-K animations for Netflix come in. So our guys get to see people who are very, very successful what they do and who start out just where they are. And so that gives them the attitude that they can achieve just like these other guys have. They've got a model to go after.
Yeah, I think that program as a whole, I'm sorry, I hope I wasn't cutting anyone off, but that program as a whole, Future Kings, actually, it gives a lot. Like Dr. King, if you never asked me to join that one summer, I don't think I would be here, actually. I think I would have been looking to do something completely different, because that program brought me to where I am in being in Norfolk State and wanting to pursue being an engineer. Because I remember we took a trip to, I don't remember, we went to a plant, an electric plant. And I remember hearing about what you could do as an engineer, and being I can't remember, it was a field engineer, that's what it was. And how you got to go places, and what you did and what you got to do and how you got to travel. And that one thing I was locked into being one of those type of people, to just being a field engineer. And I think that if I wasn't a part of this program, I don't think I would have learned that. I don't think I wouldn't have been here at all. So it definitely has value.
That's the only thing I'd like to add. I'm very encouraged that we are moving in the direction of having so many programs and being able to put so many examples in front of young people, and quite frankly, non-traditional age. I think sometimes we make a mistake when we presume that because of someone's chronological age that they know of all the different opportunities available for them or for their children. And we have to keep in mind that within the home, we also have a lot of influence, and it's not always necessarily positive. What I will say though, and Jackie's story kind of reminded me of a story which would be the other side of that coin. A young Latina woman that I met on a similar panel, of course, an in-person panel, and I was sharing a little bit about my experience, and she came up afterward and she was really crying. And so at first I was a little unnerved, but she started explaining to me that her family had moved from Mexico, and she was, first generation college student, et cetera. And so to fast forward, this young lady, she was rocking and rolling. She was doing great in school. She had an amazing internship with Nissan. They wanted to hire her on after graduation. But the issue came about, so we started meeting maybe monthly, kind of informal mentoring. And at one of our meetings, she expressed to me that one of her instructors had pulled her to the side and told her that women did not belong in her field. And, I often think of her and what may have happened if she didn't have someone to kind of bounce that idea off of. And I wonder how many students who don't have strong, role models in their lives are one and done. You know, someone says that to you one time and you really take that into your being and you start to believe that and you start looking for clues to support that. And so I still say that we all, whatever space we're in, we need to be super vigilant because we never know the flip side of what students are hearing from us.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point and that's one of the purposes, mission for GlobalMindED as well is, mentorships and internships is so important. So you have these students and these young people who have different voices in their head and in their ear, and they're not just hearing it from, sometimes we're constrained by the environment we come from, not good or bad, but just that's the household we come from or the background that we come from. But that doesn't mean that should define our future, so we should be able to give them opportunities to hear more voices and more opportunities and people who have overcome, as Dr. King said, overcome those environments, those socioeconomic disadvantaged environments, and putting those role models in front of them in your program, Future King program. That's excellent because it transforms them outside of their own limited world, and they see more opportunities, and the world is much bigger than what they have so far been exposed to.
Back to you, Michelle, just quickly. In terms of non-traditional students in the College of Applied Technology, what types of collaborations and associations do you utilize to bring students in for awareness, et cetera? How do you reach those non-traditional populations?
Well, we are in a really, I think, positive and fortunate situation that we're within a county that also has a senior institution and community college. And I should say in Tennessee, unlike states like Illinois, our technical schools are separate, right? So we're not part of the community college and we're not associated directly with them, but we're able to bring students in wherever we find them. So we have partnerships with the Chamber of Commerce, and we have partnerships with our American Job Center. We even work with Skills USA, which, as you know, is a national organization that you can start really in middle school and continue to work your way up. And so recently we formed a partnership between our technology school, community college, and then our four-year institution. And we're calling ourselves sister schools, but we're collaborating and kind of painting that picture for our students at TCAT who may not want to necessarily go directly to work or who will need to go directly to work, but begin having aspirations about perhaps 2-year and 4-year institutions.
There's an interesting statistic I just pulled up from the U.S. Bureau of Statistics, Labor Statistics. They project an increase of 1 million STEM occupations in the next 10 years, and that more than 90% of these STEM occupations require a bachelor's degree or more. Here in Virginia alone, there's projection that we'll have 4,000 job openings per year in the STEM sector. And so that's job openings, not the ones that are actually filled. So it seems as though there's a critical need in terms of the workforce. And I say that with, wink, wink, because there definitely is a critical need. And how are we going to fill it if we continue to position STEM as something that you have to have superpowers in order to enter? How many other degree programs can you think of that have a requirement, have weeder courses? Are there weeder courses in social sciences? Don't think so. Are there weeder courses in the languages? I don't think so. But when it comes to, biological sciences, chemistry, engineering, computer science, neuroscience, there are courses that are built to weed students out versus courses that are built to welcome them in, right? So it continues. It's not just in K-12. Jackie, in discovery education, what types of initiatives are I read your portfolio, but what types of direct connections do you have that are helping to keep STEM equity at the forefront?
Well, I could say, as I said earlier, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I know we've made a deliberate, intentional focus on diversifying the images within the services or instructional materials that we have. And so students will see the diversity of if you're a software engineer, it might be a young woman that's a software engineer. If you see that, trying to think of all the career profiles that we have. We have tons of career profiles, but we saw that there was a lack of diversity in it. So we made sure that we actually went to our corporate partners. So we have partners like Boeing and DuPont. And we said, when we profile the careers that exist in your industry, we want to see diversity. And so when students are interacting, they can see themselves. So hopefully we're inspiring them to say, you know what? That's something that I might be able to do, because they do see themselves in the instructional materials that we have for teachers to expose them to the potential careers that they might want to pursue. We also have virtual field trips that we provide as well, because we talked about equity earlier. And if you're in a rural community and you can't make it to one of those big, Amazon plants, well, guess what? We have virtual field trips that will take you there, that if you have access to the technology, which is another discussion, but if you have access to the technology, you can be there as if you were physically there. And so what we're trying to do is make more exposure. So, inspire students of the opportunities that exist within STEM. We also ask our industry partners to support schools. So not just supporting them by investing in the instructional resources that they could have, but actually engaging in classrooms. So you can go into the classrooms and they can interact with someone that they saw in a video talking about their career in their classroom. And so those are just some ways that we're working to, close the gap, build interest and inspire. And, we have the other instructional resources that we can talk about, like the math and science, but we want to make sure that students even just see the possibilities. One thing that I did not share was that I was actually an environmental scientist in the Army. I graduated from an HBCU. That teacher, Dr. Sally, who said to me, do you think about another career? She talked to the ROTC department and said, hey, she wants to switch her major. And they said, okay, we'll give her more money on a scholarship if you switch your major to a science or engineering field. So that changed my life as an environmental scientist. And then I went into the classroom and took what I learned in the classroom, but I had to share those stories too, because there's students that didn't even believe me. They're like, wait a minute, you were in the Army? Wait, you were doing what in the Army? You were an environmental scientist? And so I think it's up to us to also share our stories like this as much as possible. And I think, as much as we reach, we have to pull. And I think that's also something that I try to do in my work through Discovery Education, and make those connections as much as possible.
Thank you. Anybody else want to join in on that? I do like that phrase, as much as we reach, we have to pull. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. So in terms of the next 10 years, if we were a think tank and we were a thought leader panel, and we were, crowdsourcing, using all of our brain cells on one thing right now, what would we need to do in the next 10 years to make the STEM field resemble the US population? I like all the things that we have said, but what would be the top 3 things, the top 5 things, in what order, in addition to things that are already underway? Like, what can we do to just shake things up and make a big change? I know we're doing things in our local places, kind of small scale. Jackie's portfolio is pretty big. Michelle has a whole institution. Zion's working, but what can we do if we could control society? What would the top 3 things be?
I think that one of the top things would be to work harder at getting to know individual students as individuals. So many times that adage, you never get a second chance to make a first impression, winds up being one of those things that that becomes a gatekeeper. If someone is very intelligent but has a speech impediment, for example, a lot of times teachers will begin directing him away from certain areas. Or if he comes in needing some help, but he doesn't know how to ask for what he's trying to do because of his speech impediment or because of a lack of vocabulary, then he can get redirected in an area away from where he really wants to go. But if you get to know that person, like we get to know them in Future Kings, then we get to know what their aspirations are, we can connect with them, and we can expose them to different things that do become in line with where they're trying to go. But it takes some time, it takes some effort. Within the program, we see that working with students with special needs who may be labeled as either emotionally disturbed or specific learning disabled or all kinds of other types of things that they get labeled with school day. And because of that, they are not pointed toward the types of STEM fields. But when they come into our program, then they get exposed to things, they get a chance to actually excel in some of these STEM fields that we're trying to get them into, and that they may not have even known about prior to coming to our meeting. And the result of that is that oftentimes these same students become leaders in the program. That only happens because we get to know them and they get to know us. We create a safe space for them, and they find peer relationships that they can build on. And one of the things I could say is that although I may know who is labeled special needs and who is labeled talented and gifted, the participants in our program don't know that. And so they interact with each other just like they would as part of a team. And I think just like they would as part of a sports team. And I think that is possible because we have small groups that we're working with, which is a disadvantage from K-12 schools. But if we can find ways that we can really get to know these students as individuals and not just numbers, then we can really provide the platforms for them to be successful in these fields.
Yeah, you mentioned the word safety. One of the things I wanted to add while we were on that is in our research that we are currently conducting, there is a strong element of psychological safety that is built by having this cohort program with all Black and Latino boys learning STEM together. The psychological safety that is built with the instructor and the trust and the rapport has really paid dividends in terms of students staying in Future Kings, staying interested in science and math and technology, and then actually going to college and majoring in it. So that element of psychological safety is one that we have found in our research. And I would love if there are people out there in the internet world who are also working and researching this, if they're also finding psychological safety, et cetera, and they want to share information on that, please do contact us, because I do feel that is definitely seems like it's part of the winning recipe.
Zion, could I ask you quickly, how big an impact you think it was having guys in Future Kings that you were with for multiple years?
In what way do you say? Like,
well, like, you know, when you're in it and you know who's going to be there with you next year, when you go to your concentrations, you know it's going to be there. You guys get to go on field trips together. You get to work together. How big of an impact is that in wanting you to stay in the program as opposed to go off and do something else?
It makes that makes a pretty big impact, because at such a young age as some of the kids in the Future Kings enter into, including me, when you build a friendship, when you start making friends in a group like how you are, and you start coming up, you know, if you hear, oh, I'm gonna be back next year, Future Kings, I'm gonna be back next year, you get excited because you're with your friends and you're learning at the same time. You're both learning the same thing, you're having fun. And it makes learning better than it already is, more fun than it already is, because now you're learning with friends, and then you get excited because you're like, oh, every other week I get to go, you know, go build drones with I get to go build drones with my best friend. You know, that it makes a big impact because it keeps you invested, it keeps you in there instead of being there alone. And you're just like, well, do I want to go build drones by myself? Does that sound like fun? It doesn't sometimes, unless you are a loner, you know, but that's different people. But for most people, they want to be there with their friends. So when you meet people and you make friends, it makes learning 10 times better.
Yeah, Zion, I was going to add, I had an opportunity to work at Black Girls Code, and there were summer camps in which we had young women come together, and they would, you know, sit in community, eat together. It wasn't, you know, they learned how to code, but they also were in a community that, like you said, Zion, that inspires you. What you see is around you. You're learning together. It takes away the, you know, the stigmatism of, oh, am I smart enough, or I'm not smart enough, or, you know, there's a boy or male in my class and they achieve better in math and science and I'm not supposed to. You take that away, and young women found that they inspire each other and felt more confident engaging and anticipating, and participating. And so I think what you're saying goes back to the community. I don't think we have a diverse pipeline. If you talk about North Carolina A&T and their engineering program, if you talk about the program which you're in, Zion, there is a pipeline, but it's the leaders, like we said earlier, that are the ones that are going to make the decision. So if you said, the question was, in 10 years, I think we have to demand that the diversity. We have to demand that the products that we all use have to be the folks that create them, the folks that market them, have to have representation of ourselves. And if they don't, and if we don't, then do we not buy them? Maybe that's something we have to talk as a community. But we have to demand the things that are in our world actually is representative of all of us. And it's representative in the folks that make decisions, the folks that are in leadership have to have that representation, because if not, they're not thinking about how do I successfully create an environment like Zion just shared, where folks feel confident, they feel comfortable to even stay in that environment. So I think it's something that we intentionally have to demand. And if we don't receive it, then there's other actions that we have to take. And that might be my radical part coming out of me, but I would say that's what we have to change, because I should not hear another story like mine. I should not hear a story that it took 12 years for someone to say, hey, are you interested in a STEM field? That should happen as young as pre-K, if not, even younger than that, because it is possible. So I think we have to demand it. We have to demand the change.
And so, Susan, going back to your question about where might we be in 10 years, if I'm looking at STEM equity as providing a level playing field for all, regardless of the social economic status, I think that in 10 years, we may have more people from diverse communities in STEM, but I don't think we'll be much closer to having real STEM equity. I think it will be that we're building these pipelines, like you said, and those pipelines are bringing people in. But as far as having that level playing field for everybody, I just think there are a lot of societal barriers that are not going to change. They're embedded in America, and they're just not going to change. So I just don't think that will be any closer to equity. But I think we will have higher numbers in the field.
Well, and Eric, I'm glad you brought that up, because that kind of scoots back toward, I guess, what my goals are. Again, having worked at a private, HBCU, more privileged and students that I've worked with, and then working with parents and families from less financially fortunate situations is what I'm trying to say. And seeing that, sometimes, regardless of how much love and care there is in the home, if there is not that expectation that the student can and will succeed at a certain level. I mean, you talk about equity. To me, that's one of the most stark differences from working at a small private HBCU to working in communities with families on the one end who just absolutely, there's no option. Like this, you're going to do this, and they may let you choose which STEM career you're going to be in, but you're gonna succeed in one. To families that really aren't even convinced themselves that that's the best path for you. So I think addressing equity in that way is really, we're going to have to lift the whole community. Like, we're going to have to convince families that STEM is for everyone, and your kids can do this. And you know what? You can go back to school and do this. I think that's really going to help in terms of having that, level of equity.
But there's another thing to it, because there are some families who expect that when they have their kids, they want them to go into the STEM field. More, actually, no, not they want them to. They try to decide for them that they want to go into the STEM field. Like, they say, like, hey, I understand we see that you have a passion for this, but we want you to be an engineer. We want you to do this. We want you to do biomed. And that's another thing that sometimes forces people away from doing STEM fields, because that's not what they want to. That's not what some kids want to do. Because some kids are good. Some kids are good at drawing. Some kids are good at taking photos. Some kids are good at art. There are other things that kids want to do. So when you get forced, when you grow up and it's always been preached, you're going to be an engineer, you're going to be an engineer. It's not, do you want to be an engineer? It's, you're going to be. The moment those kids get the freedom of pick what you want to do, they're gonna immediately bow out of being an engineer because they've been forced for their entire life. They've been told, and now it's not their dream to be an engineer. So that's another thing that's another thing that we sometimes forget. Some kids are forced to try. Some kids are forced into the STEM field, and when they don't want to be.
I think that's a great point. And I think, Eric, you said earlier, the equity in 10 years that's a lofty goal. And I know it's just for us to kind of kick around and discuss, but I do think, from your program, and I know that you go, to lower grades, but I think exploding that and putting that out there in a larger scale to reach students at an earlier age, that 5th, 6th grade level, because that's where we lose a lot of our students, right? In terms of math and science and their interest in school, because they've been told that they're not good or not competitive, or they get in trouble for every little thing that normal kids do. So you lose them. So if we reach our kids at an earlier age, and as Zion just said, get them naturally interested. So it's not someone forcing them into these fields. We're exposing them to them at an early age, and they genuinely take to that and they like it. And then they want to continue to pursue it as they get older. So now you are building a true pipeline. But I think at the top where we are now with students, college graduates, and people who are out in the work field, there's a lot of work to do. A lot of companies, we talk about DE&I, and I didn't say this, but my background is, I've got 30 years in corporate America. So I've been CFO and SVP and all that. And I was typically either the first Black or the only Black hired. And this is going back over 30 something years. So I think I've seen companies want the diversity because that checks off a box, or that helps you stay out of some kind of trouble with the federal government or whatever. So they check off the box, but the equity and the inclusion part, that's cultural. That's where they really want you at the table. They really value your input. They really see you as a person. They really want you to make your genuine input without trying to change you into something that you're not, or feel like you're an affirmative action hire or something like that. But in equity, they pay you what you're worth, that you're doing the same work that the person next to me is doing, and I should be recognized and paid for that. So that's where I think we have a lot of work still to be done. But you take it in bite-sized chunks, more exposure at the pipeline at early age, continuing to put people into these positions by breaking down these barriers, and then fighting like heck to make sure that we're getting the representation and the voice and the pay that we deserve.
And I was going to say, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think, Susan, you said earlier, you have to be superwoman or superman to be in a STEM field. And it connects back to, I think, what Zion is saying too. All of us, I'm going to assume all of us have pushed or pulled either toy little truck or a car or something, right? So we pushed and we pulled it. That's STEM. It's either the object that was created, the energy that it takes to push, to pull it. We have to take away the stigmatism of it. It's so big that we can't even think about seeing ourselves doing it. And that's what a push and a pull is, what a kindergartner does, right? And so we have to, I remember in 5th grade, taking my 5th graders, when they, how they learned friction? I had them play tug of war. Some had sneakers on, some had sneakers off. And what's going to happen here? I didn't even talk about the word friction. They figured it out, but it was through tug of war. And it was a deeper concept that sometimes is hard to think about, but it was easy if we show them the real world application of things. And STEM is all around us. But Zion, I understand what you're saying, because I have 2 sons, and they say, Mom, everything's not STEM. Everything's not STEM, because I'll make STEM out of everything. But I have to be careful with that as well, because they'll say to me all the time now, when am I going to apply this? When am I going to have to apply this in life? We have to make those connections for students so they can see that it's not as hard as they think, although it's a lot of work, but we have to simplify it for them at the earliest age.
I completely agree.
And building on what Zion was saying about choice, we had a student in Future Kings who was a kind of behavior problem. And we were working with him on his behavior. We have our 4 silos, like I was saying, but he didn't really he wasn't really attracted to any one of those. He tried all four, and he just didn't feel like he was fitting in with any of those, but he had a love of photography. And so we set him up with a mentor to begin taking a specialized program in photography. Well, he loved that, put all of his heart and soul into it, and became very, very skilled at it. From there, he went into digital marketing and started getting the behind the scenes technology in order to be a good digital marketer, exposed to all the math and science and technology behind the scene on using his photography on the front end and his digital marketing, math, technology skills on the back end. And so we wind up with somebody who's got a STEM, he doesn't see photography as being a STEM field, but in fact, he had to master a number of STEM topics in order to be successful in what he really wanted to do. And that becomes a model that that's easy to overlook. But Zion says that we kind of need to connect with the students where they are. We can connect with them, and that goes back to our dessert first concept, where we meet the students where they are, we give them things that they enjoy, okay, but eventually we sneak in all that other stuff that we think they need in order to be successful.
Right. I have a question for you all. What about curriculum? It seems to me if everyone was required to take AP Stat, AP Calc as a requirement, not as parent has to opt you in or the school has to choose you, wouldn't that position more folks for success?
I would say that curriculum, it's not about, I wouldn't say it's about what it is. So I think it's more of how they learn, of how you learn it. I don't think it's what you need to learn, it's how you learn it. Because as we've known for a while now is that all kids learn differently. I prefer to be more hands-on when I learn. Some kids prefer to look at it, some kids prefer to be told, but there are times where even now today, I have a teacher who I have to give it to him because he is pretty old, but he just talks for an hour, and it's a business class and I'm supposed to learn. But the problem is that when you're just talking to me and you're only talking and you're very monotone and you don't try to interact with the class, and he tries his best to start a little bit of a conversation, but it doesn't really work. You start losing kids. You start losing them in the conversation and what they're trying to learn, because to us, we're just like, this is boring. We want to go. I don't want to be here. Why would I try to learn? I can't even understand. I don't even want to hear you talk. I want to be able to know I want to see what you're talking about. I don't want to just hear you read off a list of notes in a PowerPoint. That doesn't work for some people. Now, for some it does, but for others, it requires a little bit more. So I don't think it is the curriculum. Now, there are some times where it is the curriculum, but I think it's more of the people teaching that curriculum than it is the actual what is trying to be taught.
Zion, what a wise young man you are, I would say.
See why I chose him?
Yes,
See?
absolutely.
I can't wait to witness this.
Yeah, and in terms of curriculum, I was one of the writers for the Next Generation Science Standards. So all the science standards that most students in most states interact with in K-12 interact with those national standards. And part of our charge was to change the way we wanted it to be taught. Because just like you said, Zion, if you just have to memorize a periodical table, who's going to memorize that? But if you have to build one and create one yourself, I think students might remember that, right? And so I 100% agree with you that you have to let students, I think inquiry-based, hands-on, authentic, real-world learning is what is going to keep students interested. Otherwise, it will have, the glaze that we would all have. If you just were sitting there listening to someone talk to you all day about gravity, how in the world can you teach gravity if all you're going to do is talk about it, rather than interacting with it and allowing students to develop their own understanding, because that own understanding will carry them, for life. So I think it's important to have high quality curriculum, but I think it's also important to have an environment in which is safe to learn, to ask tons of questions, because that's what students should be able to do, ask tons of questions, and then they should be able to try to figure out their answers through hands-on learning. And if you have that formula, I think we'll have so many more students interested in actually learning, about science, technology, engineering, and math. And if we remove these labels at an early age, I tried to do it. When we wrote the next generation science standards, I said, why does a fifth grader need to know they're learning about physics? And if you tell them it's physics, most likely that fifth grade teacher is not going to want to teach it. So can we remove all those labels? You can't. In education, everything has to have a label and organize things. But I think we can change that depending on how we receive the information and how we interact with it.
And I think your example from prior, Jackie, was perfect when you were saying how you taught friction by having a tug of war, but some students may have had on sneakers and some were just in socks. And they come out of that with a real life lesson about exactly what friction is. And when I was going through school, no one ever taught us that in that way. You got to read a book, maybe you saw a picture, maybe you saw a fulcrum, you saw all kinds of stuff that had no real connection to who I was when I was doing. But that kind of fun thing that you did, I think is an outstanding a way to teach and can be replicated in practically all the things that we're trying to teach the kids.
Yeah,
Well,
another thing. Oh, I'm sorry. So another thing is like when we talk about this doesn't just go for K through 12. I mean, this also should apply to college and higher education as well, because at the same time, you're not, as a college student right now, you're not gonna have a college student is interested when you have them come in for a 5 to 6 class, and you hear talking. I'm tired. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be at this class in the first place. I'm here because I have to be here and I need the credits. And unless in like higher education, when you have the more interactive, we have more interactive things that you do, like a kindergartner would, or a fifth grader or a 12th grader, with anyone in K through 12, that would really, I would say, I don't have the word for it, but it would help, because it would be like, okay, sure, it's 5 o'clock, but now we're doing an actual activity to try to get it into someone, to try to learn. That would help, keeping them engaged, because as a college student, you're tired around 5 o'clock. You want to go get food at 6. If you have a class around 6, you want to go get food, you want to hang out with your friends. As long as you find something to keep our heads straight and focused on the work, and not on the work, but what we're learning, and we actually learn it, then you're doing then that's all you need to do. But just sitting there talking and all that, that's not going to help. That's what I mean by we bring how interactive like tug of war was to introducing friction, bringing that to higher learning, like college, would be amazing for some students. I think it would be amazing for me. I think I would learn a lot, because I'm sorry, I'm not gonna try to take up too much time here, because in my engineering class, we just got done building a robotic arm. We spent 2 classes, we had 1 class a week. We spent 2 classes building a robotic arm in a group. That felt like secondhand nature to me, just messing around with screws, reading instructions. And when it's hands-on, it really did help, because I was just like, okay, well, this is how we're supposed to do it. This is how you build it. And then this is how you're reading instructions. That's what I mean by being more interactive helps for some kids.
Yeah, I really appreciate the depth of this conversation and the energy that we have here. And as we close out, because we're heading up to the 5 o'clock East Coast time, want to give everybody a chance to give one last shout out. And Michelle, I'd like to start with you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to start by saying, Zion, you have made me very proud to be affiliated with a technical institution, because y'all may or may not know, we're very much hands-on. That is how we teach. And your example of being bored in class, that's relevant for adults as well. So that's the first thing I wanted to share. And then Just in closing, I really look forward to being able to open up to more multi-generational solutions for STEM. I don't want our, a certain generation to feel like they're the lost generation or left behind. As Jackie mentioned earlier, STEM is everywhere and everything. And I feel like the more we can drive that message home, the more comfortable we will be, whether it's at a tech school, 2-year, 4-year institution, or in the home.
Thank you. Jackie?
Oh, well, I think forums like this, I want to thank you to have, discussions in forums like this, I think just sheds the light on the work that everyone here is doing and all the work that is still yet to be done, and what we have to do. But to see, a young man like Zion speak to his experience, I think is inspirational to many. I think that's what I'd like to see more of. We've been through this pipeline, just like Lance said, 30 years in corporate America. I think we need to shed the light more on students and hear more of their voices. The more voices that we hear, I think we'll get a better understanding on what their needs are and how we can support their needs. So I would just say, let's, give the megaphone to students and platforms so that we can support them, because they're going to be the change makers for tomorrow.
Thank you. Eric?
Well, thank you for inviting me to be on the panel. It's been informative for me. I certainly believe that if we want to get more students into STEM, that we really have to think through the knowledge transfer between those who know it and those who are trying to communicate it to those who don't know it. What we found is that we can teach college level topics to students who are in middle school and high school if we reinvent the way that we perform that knowledge transfer. If we use tools that they use every day, if we use vocabulary that they're much more used to, then they can grasp the content, and we've been able to help them grasp that content, even though they don't have the life experiences and they may not have the vocabulary or background, that by providing the tools that they use in their everyday life to communicate, then they're able to grasp the concepts. I think that, and so hearing from you other panelists has really helped me understand that we're on the right track with what we're trying to do. And we're looking forward to finding new ways that we can improve the way we do what we do.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that you like our graduate, Zion McNeely. Zion, thank you very much for representing Future Kings.
And Zion,
No
in your closing statement, if you want to state the job you want after college and where you want to work, we can try and help make that happen. So in your closing statement, please state the future. Where will you be?
Definitely. So first, I want to thank you. Doctor, for giving me this opportunity. This is my first ever panel, and I didn't think I'd be talking this much. That is a big surprise to me. But I do plan on continuing to be in electrical engineering, at least until I feel it, unless I feel it is it's something I cannot do, or it is something that might stop me, or I'm getting too I can't really describe it, but I will plan to stay in a STEM field regardless. I plan on graduating in a STEM field, whether it's electrical engineering or computer science or cybersecurity. I just plan on graduating. In terms of what I want to do, I do want to work on, I have realized I have a thing for working on vehicles, and I want to try to work with automotive companies by the time I get out of college, but that might not be the case. We'll see what happens. So, but thank you for the opportunity.
As they say where I'm from, you name it and claim it. So we'll try and help make that happen for you. And thank you all for tuning in today and being part of our STEM equity webinar. And we're here every third Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And we look forward to seeing you in future. Oh, I'm sorry, Celeste and Lance. Celeste wants you to give a goodbye from the GlobalMindED world.
Yeah, but you said it eloquently. But thank you everyone for participating in this panel. Thank you particularly to you, Dr. Swayze, for being our panel leader and bringing the wealth and knowledge to this discussion, but also the participants. Very, very engaging discussion, very beneficial to everyone, I'm sure, who's going to hear this. So I just want to thank everyone on behalf of GlobalMindED, and also, to invite you to look at our conference coming up in June of next year in Denver, June 7th through the 9th. You can see that on our website, but we do have a great segment in there that talks about the student voice, so having students talk about some of the things that Zion was communicating, hearing from them and what their needs are from their perspectives. I think that's a great forum for that. So those who are interested and can plan ahead and start thinking about that, I invite you to do so. But with that said, I just thank everyone for your time and your energy and your passionate discussion, and we are very grateful for that. So thank you.